Hello, everyone. Joshua Gilliland here, one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. In California, it's a dark, rainy night. In other parts of the country, weather's unknown. But I can say this, everyone has a warm glow in their heart for Baby Yoda and Chapter 8 of The Mandalorian, Redemption. With me tonight to discuss Chapter 8 is Thomas Harper and Gabby Martin. Thomas, Gabby, how you both doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm still wondering where I can get my hands on some Bacta spray because that stuff looks amazing. And the fact that it can heal an almost near death wound is like, I need it. I need it in my life as a clumsy person.
I'm personally looking online to see if I can hire my own IG-11 droid to help take care of my own daughter at points and also defend her if need be with brutally deadly force.
Yeah, I like the concussion spray. That could be great in football games.
That's
and
true. Quick, you got your bell rung. Go see the assassin droid.
All better.
Yeah.
Don't worry, you can take your helmet off in front of him.
It's like aloe, but more than sunburns. Yeah, this I cannot express to both of you the amount of joy and love I felt for The Mandalorian. The entire season, and especially the last two episodes, were a lot of fun. I was disappointed to be wrong about two of my predictions, but I did get 1 out of 3, so not horrible. But let's talk about the glory. So, like, we begin with lots of murders, and let's talk about the one that what I was wrong about. I thought Krell, Baby Yoda would have healed him, and he was just almost dead. He was
dead.
Yeah.
And that bothered me. I don't know how you guys felt, but that really bothered me.
Well, I have to say I think it streamlines the show. I was sad to lose him, but I think it streamlines things and opens the door for some new characters going into season 2 that, where hopefully that void will be filled with Nick Nolte's voice, giving life to some other amazing character. I am going to miss his quotes and just the way, sort of like the client and Werner Herzog, he just says everything and I just want it on a t-shirt or a mug.
Yeah. Same. I'm like, after having Werner Herzog and Nick Nolte this season of like super amazing characters, I think they're really going to have to step it up next season with who they bring in, how that person characterizes whoever they're playing, because it was just amazing. And I knew he was dead. I knew, that Baby Yoda didn't heal him, but it was very sad to see him, get a burial at the end.
Yeah. Which was fitting.
Mm-hmm.
And this show has lots of t-shirt worthy quotes. I mean, like, just out of the gate, from I have spoken to this is the way, you are protected, which was in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
There were lots, and that's just cool.
Do the magic hand thing, baby. Do the magic hand thing. Which I am 90% sure that Carl Weathers improvised that. I need him to confirm that because I'm like so sure he improvised that.
And just a quick cut to Baby Yoda like waving like, ah.
It's like, I love all of you so much. Yeah, I adore Carl Weathers. It's just the fact, the line about, it's not a race, it's a creed. And he said it to the guy who played Apollo Creed. That was just, I don't know if that was intentional or what, but God bless them. That was so meme-worthy. So meme-worthy. Well, let's get into the new big bad. So we have Moff Gideon and his sparkly Imperials who apparently are taking good care of their armor and probably are well-funded somehow. And, there's the passing line about, wasn't he executed as a war criminal?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, what happened here? So how do we classify Moff Gideon and his Imperials? So are they still Imperial? Are they like the Japanese soldiers who refused to surrender after World War II? Except we don't have guys living up in, the mountains in the Philippines or some tropical island for 45 years. They're still a functional military. Are they a political group like you would consider like like neo-fascists running around like neo-Nazis? Are they a rogue state? And like, if they actually control territory and have a working government of some kind, are they this like rogue independent state that needs to be dealt with? Localized fascists? Again, that's kind of like the political group. Or Gabby, I think you might have brought up the issue that they could be a gang. So with that, why don't you share your thoughts on what their status could be?
Yeah, so a gang is defined as a group of persons who act together in concert, especially for criminal or illegal purposes. And they also share a common identity. So the way I saw Moff Gideon, once we get that little tidbit that he was supposedly executed for war crimes, and of course Cara thinks him dead, which is why she doesn't believe that it's him until Mando confirms that it is him, that the only way, that who would know his name would be Moff Gideon. Seems to me like he was clearly tried for war crimes. However, that form of trial took place. He's clearly labeled a war criminal. He's sentenced as a war criminal. He's sentenced to death. And then theoretically, he must have escaped that sentence because clearly he's not dead. So it almost seemed to me like, a drug dealer, high drug kingpin that has escaped custody, that has gone back to his organization and is leading them. They're well funded, doing whatever illegal activity they are doing, one of which is obviously securing the child. But it seems to me very much like a gang, a criminal syndicate, that he's just kind of escaped from his custody and into and back to leading. So it doesn't seem anything more than that, any sort of political or any sort of government function to them.
When we dove in the last episode in terms of the in-universe breakdown and what Gideon might belong to, and I think we covered how the Civil War formally ended between the New Republic and the Empire, and sort of where we left it is there was still a galactic empire, but they were essentially defanged. They had I would call it very, very limited governmental authority. Probably, I don't even know if they had anything more than just, the veneer of authority on certain worlds within a very segmented portion of the inner galaxy. But they had no military. They were stripped of it. And the New Republic drew a line and said, hey, certain folks are pardoned, but if you keep fighting, you are declared a war criminal. And as Gabby mentioned, Gideon already got declared, presumably tried for his crimes, and then his minions, as they might still wear the Imperial armor, and it certainly appears that they're holding themselves out as some sort of Imperials. I don't know what flag they're operating under, but in international law terms, I think they would be called unprivileged belligerents, would be the technical term for them, because these are folks who are directly participating in hostilities, and clearly Gideon and his Imperials are out there blowing stuff up and snatching people up and sort of breaching the peace, as it were. But they've lost their combatant status as a result of that peace accord. They've got no lawful ability to conduct warfare, the sort of things that they're doing. And that's important because primarily it's going to strip them of any that sort of core immunity that you have for acts of war. So in war, a soldier kills another person and you're immune from prosecution for murder because it's immune as an act of war. Assuming you're a lawful combatant. unprivileged belligerents lose that status. Effectively, you're out on your own. And you don't have that veil of protection there. You also lose protection for things like prisoner of war status, which I think a normal Imperial would qualify for. Assuming the New Republic swept in and rounded these guys up, they would not enjoy any of those protections.
Yeah, there's so many questions with this, and maybe we'll find out in the second season, because I sense they could be more of a rogue state, just because, like, they have working TIE fighters. Like, that means there are maintenance crews working on them. The guys who are running around Navarro with the client all have beat up, bad looking armor. The guys with Gideon, including the Death Troopers and the Flamethrower Trooper, all have good looking armor. So that means they're funded. How are they funded? Are they collecting taxes? Are they just like robbing? I mean, like, what are they doing to have that source of funding? Because if it's a tax base of some kind, that at least is like renewable, as opposed to just living off of plunder, which means, I mean, like, you got to be able to pay the troops. And we'll talk more about the biker scouts in a minute here, but those sounded like regular troopers having a conversation. And it doesn't sound like they've given up the Imperial doctrine, the Imperial ways, that they just do what they're told. And that's telling, because it sounds more like a nation state.
They've got all the Imperial credits that nobody else wants to accept.
Yeah, but they're not just like printing greenbacks. Like, they have to have a source of funding, whether that's gold, or coaxium. I mean, again, if they had coaxium mines, that at least would make sense from a funding mechanism. Like, are they on something like a Saudi Arabia, like, where they're just on this giant oil field and like they don't worry about production, and except it's coaxium or some other rare mineral that people need in order that's a valued form of currency, and people are willing to trade with them. So
when you bring up a really good point, because there's a line in one of the earlier episodes that I think Grief says, where if their paychecks dry up, they scatter like roaches, basically. The idea being that these Imperial troops, the low-level stormtroopers and stuff, are being paid, and that's their motivation to do what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Loyalty is another question. And so you got to think a guy like the client was well-funded enough to have his own entourage, even if he couldn't pay for them to clean up their armor. He certainly had that Camtono of Beskar, which having a precious mineral would certainly help in terms of being a type of currency, unlike credits that would be better to spend. But yeah, so it is interesting.
Yeah, and maybe it's just one of those things that we just accept, like, and like it.
I had a theory that, so if we suppose that Moff Gideon is the client's superior officer, right? That the client is reporting to Moff Gideon, that Moff Gideon was the one to supposedly obtain the client for Moff Gideon, or that the client was the one that was supposed to obtain Baby Yoda for Moff Gideon. And Moff Gideon was, according to Mando, involved in the Great Purge, which would have theoretically gotten his hands on the Beskar, which is what the client pays him with. So maybe that was Moff, because they never say what Moff Gideon's war crime is. I mean, they say, we assume that it's because he's a bad guy, but his war crime, in addition to the other things he might have done, might have been from the Great Purge and stealing a majority of the Beskar for himself and his gang / nefarious purposes. And once he was out of his whatever captivity sentence he was in, that's what his gang, if you will, is using to fund, is the best car, or maybe other pilferings from other imperial takings, like the Great Purge. That's this stockhold of treasure is what they're using from different worlds to pay for things.
Yeah, but they would still need to be self-sustaining in some way. Just kind of like the Nazis stealing gold and art, and like they also went after oil fields. So there's, like they needed resources. So here's the beauty of this. It's a story point for season 2 or season 3. So, but it does raise lots of interesting questions, and hopefully the writers go with it. So let's get into the fact that Moff Gideon killed a dozen of his own troopers, and this is where the biker scouts say, like, I get that point. Do you get that point? Of or an officer for interrupting shot him too. Thomas, we can handle this quickly, but as the only one here who's actually served in the military, can you see any legal justification if a general just like took out a dozen U.S. troops just to make a point?
There's an article under the UCMJ, and I should say the listeners can't see this, but Gabby and Josh just had to see me relocate. I woke up my daughter talking too loud on the podcast and had to evacuate the area where I was recording in. So I am now sitting on the floor next to the garage to record this expert analysis.
And then go put place.
and then I will go receive my punishment. So I would say to Moff Gideon, the UCMJ has two provisions that jump immediately to mind. One would be conduct unbecoming an officer, because it's a little unbecoming to gun down your own soldiers, or to give an order to have others gunned down.
Just a little unbecoming.
A little bit, like, a little. The other would be cruelty and maltreatment. It seems to, I don't even know that I need to go through the elements there. It seems to just fit that bill directly for both cruelty and maltreatment.
On the civil side, there's like no performance improvement plan. It's just kill the guy. I mean, it's a very Lord Vader move. So
yeah,
that's what civilians call wrongful termination, I think.
It kind of reminds me of our conversations regarding resistance, and that the Empire, the First Order, whatever it is, whatever form it takes, is a horrible place to work. Like, don't work there. Like, don't become a stormtrooper. Don't become any sort of trooper. Your consequences to die.
It's not worth the college money.
No, it's their GI Bill is horrible. So
we'll pay for you to go to college if you ever make it. What was that last part? Oh, nothing. Don't worry about that. Just sign here.
Say what? Yeah.
Disney Plus needs to have a whole, at least like a mini series of First Order / Empire recruitment of stormtroopers.
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking like the SpongeBob episode training video where they just show us how they keep these people motivated to work.
Sure, you'll have life support systems on your TIE fighter. And you'll definitely have a hyperdrive in case things go bad.
And a med kit. You'll have that back spray and med kit.
Does this armor block blaster shots and primitive spears? Absolutely it does. We give our troops only the finest.
Yeah, it's TIE fighters remind me a lot of the Japanese Zeros. It's like, it's fast, but there's no armor. So
good luck.
Good luck. Don't get hit. Yeah. But anyway, different discussion. Well, while we're on the subject, because a lot of things are happening, like in just the first 3 minutes of the episode, let's talk about the unpleasantness of those biker scouts taking turns hitting the bag with Baby Yoda. And it's like, first off, don't blame the actors. Like, it was part of the story. They're bad guys. They're stormtroopers. They're not supposed to be good. I found their dialogue absolutely hysterical, and it's Watiki's directorial style at its purest of these guys just talking. It's like if you've watched What We Do in the Shadows,
Yeah.
it's just, I mean, it's brilliant. It's just so fun. Of they're just two dudes talking, not rush
And
storytelling.
I think for all their like evil behavior, because you just kind of want to like jump through the screen when they hit Baby Yoda.
Yes.
I mean, I think that the stormtrooper played by Adam Pally is a little better, that he kind of defends Baby Yoda. He's like, you should probably feed him, you know, and like give him air. But he also gets bit, and then, you know, his feelings on Baby Yoda change. But I think that's the most human we've ever seen stormtroopers, and you know, just as like general, you know, employees, that they're just waiting around for a command, and you know, just sitting there. And it's really, you know, I mean, yes, they do commit child abuse, but they're, you know, just two guys working.
Yeah,
It reminded me, if you've ever seen the massively popular fan video or fan movie Troops from back in the 90s.
Yep.
It was that to a T. I mean, it was like that brought to the screen. Troops is just, I still own somewhere a VHS copy of it, but it's literally just cops, but with stormtroopers on Tatooine, and they have like a run-in with Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, and it sort of funnily explains how the Lars family homestead gets burned down, and it's that, but in a short fan film. And never would I have thought that we'd get it in actual canon material. But that's also the purest that they've ever, apart from the two troopers on the Death Star that get tricked by Obi-Wan as he's lowering the tractor beam. That's the purest representation of service members that I've ever seen, minus the child abuse. It's, you know, the killing time, you're like bored to death, and just having these inane conversations. Like, that's service right there.
And I love the confirmation that Stormtrooper Bad Aim is now canon.
Yes.
That they couldn't hit that jar to save their life.
Exactly right.
At like point blank range too. It's just,
yeah.
It's like, what? Is it the helmets? Like, what's going on here? So funny. And just like the radio chatter back and forth of like, any update? Well, he just killed an officer for interrupting, so you guys best sit tight. It's like, okay.
And they're not even concerned. They're just annoyed that it's delaying them further.
Yeah. It's like, wow. Yeah, I minus the child abuse, because again, that's bad. And hitting Baby Yoda clearly would be child abuse, because it's a physical injury upon a child by another person. So yeah, punching the bag is child abuse.
Not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Yeah, each one has at least one hit. It's like, wow.
Now, within, and I realize I'm stretching things here, so feel free to shoot me down with a big cannon here, but could you consider these two scout troopers as like peace officers or police officers of some type of law enforcement, where they're having to act within their duties? We'll use that term very broadly, to keep this this subject, if you will, in line. Certainly, maybe with that hypothetical, or that example maybe applies most to when the one trooper gets bitten on the finger.
Yeah. No, I think except for that.
No was what I was expecting.
Yeah, big no.
The biting, I think you could argue, is Baby Yoda defending himself because they're like attacking him. But I think, you know, especially the one trooper punches the bag twice, saying "shut up" after Baby Yoda does his adorable cooing. You know, I think that's excessive force by any definition. It's very much the kind of rough rides, beating with a Yellow Pages type tactics. So, and I don't see any law enforcement officer physically beating a child, especially one that's adorably cooing. Why would you want to stop that?
I don't see the police report going well with, and then you punch the baby. It's just nope, your career's over. So, which is again when we see IG-11 come in with their nurse droid, and that is just so exceptional with how he takes those two guys out with, surrender the child to me, and they're like, yeah, okay, and the whooping begins. It's so beautiful, so well
and
done.
then he just says that, oh, I'm sorry you had to see that, whereas Baby Yoda seems enthralled by all this violence. Yeah. His face when he's on the speeder coming in and IG-11 is just shooting everybody down is perfection.
It was probably a fun ride. Now, this raises, again, there are interconnected parts here, but in the flashback that we're going to see when Moff Gideon discloses, the issue with personal identifiable information, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail, but we get the full flashback with the Clone Wars and the separatist attack, and with them purposely targeting civilians. And Thomas, why don't you take the war crimes aspect of you're targeting civilians?
The separatists are really good as a teaching example of what not to do when you're in combat, because they are consistently good at breaking the most basic of war crimes, or laws of armed conflict, I should say. And one of, I would say, the 4 principles of LOAC is the obligation of combatants to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants, civilians. The business of intentionally targeting civilians is explicitly unlawful. Certainly, the law of war contemplates that civilians can and will get killed unintentionally in combat. Collateral damage is a thing, and it's just that the law of war doesn't try to legislate that reality out. But you can't go around doing what those super battle droids and gunships were doing, which is, pretty clearly murdering civilians, like, defenseless non-combatants. I think it's interesting. We'll presumably know more in season 2 as more of the Mando's backstory is discussed. But you have the Mandalorians, it looks like Clan Vizsla, based on their shoulder markings, come in to save him and rid the town of the separatists. And I would question whether those are Mandalorians that are, aligned with the Republic, which is, something that it looked like the Clone Wars was working toward the end of it, or are they operating on their own? Are they unprivileged belligerents? In other words, they're not a party to this conflict, but they've gotten involved nonetheless.
Good questions, because it's like, is that Death Watch? Okay, that was like my third option for what we could see, but it's, again, because it's like, okay, he's either going to be saved by Mandalorians, or if this was the time to bring in Ahsoka or Yoda, like if Yoda saved, him as a kid, that would make sense for him not killing Baby Yoda and saving the day. However, since he has no knowledge of the Jedi, and that plays a fact later, it's like, okay, Death Watch makes sense. It was nice seeing that armor in live action. I don't think we've seen it in anything else before, besides animation. And again, it makes sense with the Filoni connection with this series to see that. So again, it was wonderful. I think a wonderful fan service, and the right way to do fan service, where it's subtle, it's not vital to the story, but those who watched the both animated series cheer, and I really enjoyed that.
And I think another thing you might have here in this flashback, because one of the things I noticed was that all of the civilians, including Mando and his family, are in the same type of garb, that they're all in this kind of reddish, cloak type garb, which may invoke some element of, obviously this is taking place during the Clone Wars, but it may invoke some elements of genocide, of, the destruction of a particular group, racial, ethnic, national, or otherwise. If these people were some sort of religious or other sort of group native to this, whatever planet they were on. So it did seem to me to invoke some of those, at least the imagery of genocide, if not kind of the legal underpinnings as articulated in the convention, the Genocide Convention.
That's a really good point. And it would fit with the separatist MO, which would be you're either with us or we're going to send an army of battle droids and kill all of you.
Yeah, it's one thing to do the drone strike that misses. It's another thing to do the drone strike that says we're going to take out a wedding in order to get one guy. And this was, we're just taking out a village just cuz. And that's a war crime. Well, let's get into Moff Gideon's big reveal, where he breaks out personal identifiable information, naming the Mandalorian, and there was only one place his name was recorded. And we also learned that Cara Cynthia Dune is from Alderaan. That explains volumes about her with one word on why she was good to go to take on Imperials. It's like, okay, motivation makes sense. We're good. I get that. But let's break down, like in California, we have our new Consumer Privacy Act coming out on January 1, 2020. And that's wildly complicated, and it's a lot like European law, but it's the California Consumer Privacy Act. And there's a long list of what could be personal identifiable information. It's your real name, your alias, address, unique personal identifier, online IP addresses, email address, account name, social security, passport number. It goes on and on, but there's more. It also adds biometric information, internet or other electronic network activity. That could include browsing history, geolocation data, audio, electronic, visual, thermal, olfactory, and similar information. The fact it said similar means we're expecting more technology to come out that can identify people. So there's a lot there that we're going to be dealing with in California that has some European type significances. But because of World War II and the genocide that happened under the Nazi regime, Europeans rightly are concerned with your name going on a list because of your ethnicity or background, which is why they have really strict privacy laws, because of the horror that they endured during World War II. Moff Gideon had access to a lot of personal identifiable information, being an Imperial security officer or ISP, which probably was like their FBI or CIA type or something merged of both. But a lot there and lots of privacy issues. Gabby, you're quite the privacy hawk. Care to add anything to this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Here in the United States, we have, we have certain privacy regulations. Certainly, when data gets breached, there's regulations. Obviously, the one that comes to mind for most Americans with data privacy is the HIPAA laws, which regards health privacy information. But also HIPAA does extend to a bit of your own personal data, but that's only as it's related to identifying markers in your healthcare record. However, one would hope that with the amount of secrets everybody in the galaxy seems to have, that the galaxy, under either the New Republic or the Empire or what have you, would have some sort of similar to the GDPR, which was passed in 2016 in the European Union. GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation. And this is a really interesting, because the EU had something similar to our HIPAA regulations, in that healthcare records and data was kind of tracked separately and protected separately from your traditional right to privacy that was outlined in the European Convention of Human Rights and the Declaration of Human Rights. But then in 2016, they passed the GDPR, and it's this kind of wide encompassing data privacy regulation. And it covers a lot of things, from requiring consent for data processing, how data is stored, how it's handled. Companies are required to have data protection officers to be in compliance with the GDPR. So there's a lot. It's a much more overarching set of regulations and laws that applies to any sort of data, not just healthcare. So they definitely would most likely, by extracting this information during the purge, they would most likely, Moff Gideon and the Imperials would be in violation of the GDPR in some
When
form.
the two of them, Kara and Din, or the Mando, seem to have a particular interest in their privacy, maybe more so than Grief, I would say. Din, because he's a member, he's been rescued from maybe a race that was targeted and wiped out in the Clone Wars. We don't quite know, but certainly he's part of a religion now that a core fundamental part of it is masking one's identity, and so he has a fundamental interest in keeping his true identity safe. He makes the comment that the only record of his name is on the information stores on Mandalore, which presumably are sort of like the Citadel Tower at Scarif. I mean, it's not an easily breached place. And then for Kara's part, I mean, she's one of presumably the last survivors of a planet that was wiped out by the Empire. And we do see that, at least in some of the non-film materials, the Empire does have an interest in hunting these survivors down to make a point, or to, I guess, they made the point by blowing up the planet. They're finishing the point by hunting down the rest of the survivors. And, so they both have this sort of similar but different interest in keeping their identity safe. I would say maybe Kara a little bit differently, because she goes by at least a semblance or a version of her original name, but still, nonetheless, they both have a keen interest in not having their true identity shouted out to a bunch of Imperials and other bad people that would want to kill them.
Well, I think what's also interesting is that, you talk about the Mandalorian and the whole creed that centers around anonymity, being anonymous. And I think what's interesting is, he says repeatedly in the prior episodes that, he hasn't taken his mask off in front of anybody since he was a boy. But we now also learn that his name hasn't been spoken since he was a boy. Mm-hmm. So, it almost connects his image, his unmasked image with his name. And, especially in the literary context, names have such significance that to have that spoken out loud, to name him as an individual as opposed to, this group, this collective, the Mandalorians, it is revealing. And it's probably the biggest breach out of all the things we learn. And if you think about the breaches on a spectrum, you have Mando / Din's on the one end. You know, Kara, you could say that, like you were saying, Thomas, that, you know, she's being tracked, and the Empire obviously has a keen interest in survivors of Alderaan. And then the thing we learn about Greef is that he was a magistrate, right? And that seems to be almost public knowledge, that you could find out that Greef was a magistrate, and that he was disgraced and that he left his position. And so it's very kind of this spectrum of a very severe breach of data privacy versus, you know, public information.
I do enjoy the fact that Greef was a magistrate. It's like having a judge named Learned Hand, you know, like it's, or you know, there was a judge out of Baltimore, Big and E Discovery, named Paul Grimm, and he also wore bow ties, and so Judge Grimm. So Judge Greef, like that does ring for me, and
it's also nice to know that they have judges like that. I think is one of our biggest confirmations. I mean, you know, we've talked about how when sentences and, you know, like Moff Gideon being a disgraced war criminal are referenced, that obviously there's some sort of judicial system that they have to go through. But knowing that Greef is a magistrate clearly indicates that there was some sort of judicial system, even in the Outer Rims, with judges that pass sentences. And so that's, you know, really cool to know and see.
And if an Imperial calls you a disgraced magistrate, was that because you weren't sending people to their deaths? Like, you know, like that's probably a badge of honor to go like, yeah, I was fired because I wouldn't use the eugenics laws to kill people. It's like, good. That's the plot from Judgment at Nuremberg. Good. Glad you didn't kill people. Gold star. Lots there. So much there. But yeah, I did. That did tickle me. This also raises, and again, because all these issues get bound up and it's kind of a weird order to hit them, but we do have the adoption of foundlings. And let's focus this on the Mandalorian, with the fact that he was adopted by, what is it, Clan Vizsla and Death Watch. And so I don't know if he technically had parents as a foundling. Like maybe we'll see that, like, who actually raised him in season 2. We'll get into a little bit of that, and I don't know if that's going to be like Kung Fu with flashbacks or not. And sorry, I just made a Gen X reference that you guys might not know, but there was the show called Kung Fu that should have starred Bruce Lee, but instead it starred David Carradine, and that's an entirely different subject. But there were flashbacks in that, so maybe there's a little bit of that. I don't know.
Hopefully they don't go full like Arrowverse and start having
no.
a flashback for 50% of the show. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I don't want like all the Arrowverse people to come after me, but I just don't think it would work in this context.
No, it's the occasional flashback to make a point is okay, but it can't be.
That's all we need.
Yeah. Can't be half the show and then start doing flash forwards to the future. No.
It works for Arrowverse, really nothing else. Like don't prescribe that on anything else.
Except if we get flashbacks in season 2 of really cute moments from Baby Yoda in season 1 and so forth.
Yes. I will take that. You
can layer as many of those in as you want.
So let's talk about adoption and just baseline. And this is a case from Missouri from 1941, which states, adoption is a judicial act which creates between two persons a relation of pure civil nature similar to that existing between a natural parent and his child. So normally judicial process. It sounded like there actually was a process on Mandalore with how a foundling was brought in. Them being on the run now, it sounds like it's a little different, that it's almost more of a cultural or religious type just acceptance of how the system works. But they clearly did have adoption type procedures for Din to become a Mandalorian, the way that we can talk about Baby Yoda separately as we progress on how it could work with Baby Yoda and whether or not that's an actual adoption or more like a guardianship. But let's get into Moff Gideon and war crimes. So he was with the Imperial Security Bureau. So that was the definition of ISP. And he had a role with the Knight of 1,000 Tears. I don't know if we ordered it. I don't know if he was middle management, but it sounded like they purposely targeted Mandalorians. And I don't know if that was just civilians or military targets or children. What did they do exactly? But
I'm going to use a very technical legal term here, but that name sounds very war crimey.
Yeah.
I mean,
Knight of 1,000 Tears. It's not Knight of Snuggles.
It doesn't sound like an orderly, peaceful relocation.
Nope. No, it sounds like
I think they were specifically trying to invoke a very historical moment. And they nailed it spot on. They're like, how can we give a Star Wars name to an event that happened without completely ripping off, American history? And I think they nailed it. So
it'd be like, the Empire has marketing guys come in. Okay, so we're going to do Knight of 1,000 Tears. Generals, how are you going to pull this off, boys? Yeah. And then they go like, well, why don't we just start firebombing villages and orphanages and cities and markets, and we'll hit the schools too. What do you guys say? And everyone claps, and they issue horrific orders and go commit war crimes.
I feel like the stormtroopers would take this very literally, and they're like, okay, you want 1,000 tears? I will get you 1,000 tears.
Each of you has to get 200 tears.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like the way that you initiate somebody on board a new ship with like, hey, go get me a bucket of steam or 3 feet of water line. And, the poor sailor goes around saying, I need a bucket of steam. How do I get a bucket of steam? And what's water line? And the poor sailor is humiliated. This is worse. Yeah. This is worse because you'd be milking somebody for tears. And that
I would love to see that one stormtrooper just running around like gathering people's tears. It's like 200, did it, nailed it.
Fry in this bucket or else.
Yeah. Here's the picture of a loth cat. Notice how mangy he is and hasn't been cared for and groomed. Hear the sad music playing. Your tears sustain me. Yeah, it's. I don't think they weaponized Sarah McLachlan for this attack. They, I think they went in with bombers and were brutal.
You don't think they set up like giant projection screens of the ASPCA ads and just Sarah McLachlan playing in the background and like, you can help.
Maybe with the POWs, but yeah, that would be it. So that does, just for giggles, just to harken back to Nuremberg, a crime against peace, that's planning, prep, initiation, in violation of international treaties, agreements, or participation in a plan or conspiracy for the accomplishment of anything of the foregoing. And then we get into war crimes, which is namely violations of the laws or customs of war. And there's a long list of what we don't want to happen, whether it's targeting civilian populations in occupied territory, murder of POWs, killing of hostages, basically everything bad that you can think of. War crime. Then we get into crimes against humanity. And again, they can be overlapping. And that's murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, and other inhumane acts committed against any civilian population before or during the war. So probably all three were committed on Mandalore. And if Gideon gave the orders or carried out the orders, he's a very bad man. Very, very bad man.
And I have to believe that with the kind of leadership that was in charge of the Rebel Alliance and sort of where the galaxy was and how much death there and destruction had been wrought by the end of the Galactic Civil War, I don't know that there would have been a ton of appetite for death sentences across the board. Certainly in the case of the most egregious offenders, like if Tarkin had survived the war, perhaps he would have warranted it. But I have to believe that the leadership of the Rebel Alliance would have wanted to exact justice, but they wouldn't want to do that on the end of a sword at the end, because they've got to piece the galaxy back together. So I have to believe that if that were the case, you've got to clear a pretty high bar of awfulness to qualify for a death penalty in the New Republic's system. I picture them sentencing the vast majority of folks to some amount of prison time or looking to rehab folks and reintegrate them into the galaxy to be productive citizens. So whatever it is, and Josh, you described sort of like the royal flush of war crimes. It's got to be bad.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Thinking back to the American Civil War, we put lots of former Confederates in prison, but we only executed one. And that guy's name was Whirl, and he was the commandant of Andersonville. And the pictures of the Union POWs who came out of there are indistinguishable from photos of survivors from Auschwitz. It's like what they did there was beyond description. Walt Whitman said he had no words to describe what he saw. So just level of bad. That was the only one we executed. I think we could have executed a few more, but I tend to be a little harsh on that administration of justice. Looking at Nuremberg, we didn't execute all those guys. A lot of them spent the rest of their lives in prison. Except for there was one who was able to commit suicide before we could have him hung. So if the Galactic Republic in our fictional Star Wars universe was able to only go after like the worst of the worst, that raises interesting questions of like, how did he survive? Did they get the wrong guy? Was this just a bad game of telephone that we don't know how news is disseminated? Like, we don't know if there's still a HoloNet. There's a lot of culture that we don't know. And was this an issue of, pardon the term, but like fake news? Or, that Gideon was wanted for war crimes, but that got conveyed as he was convicted of war crimes. So there's, again, grounds for storytelling in season 2. Well, let's talk about refusing medical treatment on religious grounds. So Mando is hurt. Like, it's on one level, it's nice to see people actually like get hurt and have a concussion. I mean, something that always bothered me from Attack of the Clones, Padme falls out of an aircraft and just kind of dusts herself off with like, I'm all better now. Really? He has that E-Web, power source blow up, and he's hurt. He also got shot in the back. So like, he's not having a good day. This isn't an issue of like, I just need a little Gatorade and I'm good to go. It's, I'll walk it off and feel better.
Yeah.
So, the issue is, he doesn't want his helmet taken off. So he's refusing treatment on religious grounds. Now, we have religions in the United States, like Christian Scientists and like paternal grandmother and stepmother are Christian scientists, and I have strong views on that faith. And that their view is like pray about an injury and that's how you get better. Or Jehovah's Witnesses that take a very literal reading of a Bible passage that most other religions don't, about refusing blood transfusions. Now, one of you did a lot of legal research on this. Now, Gabby, can you care to share your research?
So that was not actually my legal research. I have to credit that to the Office of Legislative Research at the Connecticut General Assembly, because that's where I pulled it from. But yeah, it's really interesting. People refusing treatment on religious grounds, and I had the privilege many years ago to speak with a Jehovah's Witness about why they believe and refuse blood transfusion, among other medical treatments. And it's just very, very interesting, what their belief is. And it's very similar, especially those who are very devout Jehovah's Witness, to, Mando/Din's conviction of not removing his helmet, even though it would save his life. That he puts this creed of not having his face seen by another living thing before anything. And so when the courts get involved in this, is when there's a lot of cases in which there's life-saving emergency medical treatment that needs to be done, often requiring blood or some sort of other surgery that the patient is objecting to based on the religious grounds. And the factors that the court looks at are whether the patient is an adult or a minor. Obviously, as an adult, the court views you're free to make your decisions. You have full control over your medical decisions. Whether the person is competent or incapacitated, that's always, religious grounds or not, that's always a huge issue of whether the person is competent to make medical decisions, or whether there is a provider for medical dependence. So adults are usually allowed, if they want to refuse any life-saving treatment, they're allowed to make that decision. Courts really step in cases where there's a child involved and there's life-saving surgery or life-saving treatment that needs to be done. And generally, courts will allow parents to make decisions when it comes to elective care, or if there are alternatives to that care. But if there is no other way but to, do whatever it is that is in violation of the person's religious views, courts will step in and have authorized medical care. Often it's the physicians or the hospital that is bringing this action, this injunction, to children who require immediate life-saving treatment. But in Mando's case, he's an adult. He can make this decision. I doubt any court would have forced him to, if he didn't ultimately choose to remove his helmet. I don't think there's a court that would have denied him that decision.
Yeah, well done. And good thing for a loophole and a droid who says, "I am not alive," which cuts against a lot of my legal analysis with droids, but
I know. I was thinking of you, Josh, during that scene, because I was like, oh, he's admitting he's not human. But I think that was really the writer saying, we got to get Pedro Pascal's face on screen to justify his paycheck.
yeah. I am not a living thing. And it's like, ooh, that.
I do love IG-11's line, "You have suffered damage to your central processing unit," and he's like, "My brain?" That was a joke. It was meant to put you at ease.
At ease.
Yeah, he might be my favorite droid now. I have very conflicted feelings I have his Funko Pop here with me
And the
because
fact that he repeats it later on in the episode that he's not human, I was like, oh, that's 2 strikes against Josh's argument of droids.
we'll get to that. We're definitely going to get to that because, especially with the end, um, yeah, that was brilliant. So we have. Let's get into the issue with adoption of Baby Yoda, and what we can consider the status before we get to the River of Lava. So the armorer, is that how she's?
Yes,
Okay.
that is her name, is the armorer.
Yeah, don't mess with her.
No, she's my hero.
Yeah, referring to the Baby Yoda as he's a foundling, and he must be reunited with his own kind, and you are as its father. That raises all kinds of interesting questions for how adoption works. And is he technically adopted if Mandalorian is trying to reunite Baby Yoda with his own species?
Well,
You know, a race of sorcerer wizards. So it's
well, I think at the very least he's he's his foster parent. And I think we've known that from the get-go, that he's a guardian / foster parent, that he's taken on Baby Yoda as his charge. I think there, even in Mandalorian lore, there should have been more of a ceremony, of a ritual, to kind of signify this as an adoption. But my other objection was the fact that she provided him with no parenting guidelines, which he clearly needs some. I think I've been in family court several times, and there's plenty of pamphlets on how to raise a child. He should have just been given like a stack of those. But yeah, I think another issue it brings up too, that I thought about is she says, until the child is reunited with his family, with his kind, or he is of age, which takes us back to the very first episode, that he's 50 years old. What is of age for Baby Yoda and his species? Because 50 years old to Din / Mando is clearly way above of age. So I think that's going to be an interesting question, because if he has 1 year till, like, if 51 is of age, if 60 is of age, if 100 is of age, how long is that kind of time span that he would be in his care for?
The one thing that I wonder, because somebody put out an article saying, like, okay, by this math, Yoda would have been 30 when he died in Return of the Jedi. So was Baby Yoda in stasis for any period of time that could have stopped his aging? So, like, maybe they're a kid for 20 years. Like, because some other material, and I don't remember if it was Wikipedia, I was reading articles quickly, said that Yoda trained his first Padawan like around age 100. So is aging going to like speed up in a bit and then slow down? Like, what's going to happen here? Here's the wonderful thing, that there's plenty of storytelling options with this, but
I do hope it's something they address, since they did bring up the kind of question of his age in the pilot episode, of him kind of aging differently than other species. And now there's this question of when he's of age. So I really do hope that they address it, and that's not kind of just a passing, topic, that it really gets addressed, and we see kind of, maybe not necessarily the full how Baby Yoda and his species age, but at least getting kind of a number of where that benchmark is, where he is considered of age. Or they may just leave it indefinite and be like, he'll be of age when this series ends. Like, so.
You better live to your 400, Mando.
Yeah, we're here to make money, boys and girls. Everyone wants these shirts. Everyone wants these mugs. Everyone wants one.
Yeah.
And he's young for a long, long time. We learned with Baby Groot. Oh, yeah. So
I can only speak to Pennsylvania, as far as the adoption process goes. But I think it's indicative of a lot of states where there's a formal process. You can't just go pick up a kid at the state adoption agency like you're picking out a pair of shoes. I mean, there's an entire process that involves training and interviews and whatnot. And I guess he sort of had some on-the-job training, so to speak, taking this baby under his charge. But I wonder whether Grief couldn't sort of reassume his magistrate role and sort of bless this all off, in a single quasi-judicial act there on the Lava River.
Yeah. But certainly, you do see scenarios where, foster children, if we consider that's where this relationship is right now, because that's obviously a less informal process. I mean, it still has to go through the courts and what have you, but it's definitely a less, involved process than adoption. And the other thing, I'll say for adoption, having been adopted myself, there's several court hearings involved. You need an attorney, there's home studies, interviews. It's a months long process that involves, significant time, effort, and finances. And we don't see that here. So that's why I tend to believe, even with Star Wars canon, that this is more of a foster parent situation than a true adoption. But maybe, we'll see by the end, Din/Mando finally formally adopting Baby Yoda when he can't find his species. So
I really want the scene where the adoption agency representative is touring the Razor Crest. And it's like with the clipboard in hand, like, what's this here? You got a shower facility? Oh, it's a shower facility. It's definitely not a carbonite freezing chamber.
It's like, oh, that's his bed. That's a cabinet.
Yeah.
He is not Harry Potter. Like,
yeah.
John
What
Favreau,
is this here?
Ask me for that role. I will do it in a heartbeat. I will fly to California and do it.
What is this? Your cupboard here? Oh, wait, no, that's where all the blasters and grenades are kept.
yeah, there's a lot there. There is so much there.
He doesn't even keep him in a rear-facing child seat. It's the cardinal error.
Yeah, it is there. Yeah. So we're going to do a mock either adoption, but we might make it a foster situation at San Diego Comic Fest with law students arguing for the Mandalorian to adopt Baby Yoda. And, we have to come up with a mock home study. And a buddy of mine, another Boy Scout leader, he does adoptions. And so that's his legal focus. So he'll help with the bench brief that we'll put together. And we have a LA County judge who does family law who will preside over this. But yeah, I have a lot of homework to do on the adoption issue because the home study is going to be hysterical to write and be able to explain it's normal. I mean, people trying to kill him. I mean, who else can take care of him? And I look forward to seeing law students argue that with a straight face. So,
hey, having had to do a moot court session where I got to defend James Buchanan Barnes and his crimes, it's very difficult to talk about, fictional characters as a law student and keep a serious face.
Yeah, we did that. We did the court martial of the Winter Soldier for our first Comic Fest in 2016, and writing the NTSB reports for the 3 crash telecarriers, trying to figure out. Oh yeah, yeah. Yes. Yeah, it was tons of fun. I'll send those to you since you did that as well, so you can see the glory that I indulged in.
Shout out to the Hispanic National Bar Association for whoever did that in 2017. Yeah, that's the only time that they had fictional characters. So
yeah, I wonder if they use, because I put a lot of our stuff online. I wonder if they used what I wrote, or that's very interesting. So anyway, let's talk about the lava river. And we see another R2 unit get its head blown off. And I think that's the 3rd R2 unit to get shot in this series.
Oh.
At this point, when that kind of violence happens on the screen, I immediately think of you, Josh, and I say, man, somewhere on the West Coast, Josh is getting very upset at this episode right now. We're just very sad.
It's like, why do they keep shooting them? Like,
I love that Kara's approach, though. She reminds me of that character in My Big Fat Greek Wedding that the solution was to spray everything with Windex. Kara's solution is just to shoot everything. She's just like, shoot it. Like, the boat's not moving, shoot it. Droid's not moving, shoot it.
And the boat kept moving, which was the best.
Damn it didn't work.
Yeah, it's like, it's like, so that droid's a coxswain. That's what he would be called. And you use the, oar or sweep to try stopping the boat. Now, granted, this is like a gondola in Italy at this point, so
I may have been the only person that as soon as he broke out of the thing, I just heard Bella Notte in Note playing in the back. And I really want to edit that cut.
Yeah, it's
a beautiful night.
Wow. I'm sure you're a big fan of Lady and the Tramp too. So that's
just imagine Anakin could have had romantic gondola rides with an R2 unit with Padme
right there on Mustafar.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Honey,
he had it all for Padme right there.
Yep, it was all right there. And he destroyed it.
Honey, I went to the dark side. I wanted to talk to you about this. Yeah, that was awkward.
I did it for the gondola ride.
Yeah. So, well, we'll save the sad part to the end. Let's talk about the fact that Moff Gideon flies in with the TIE fighter. Now, I don't know if either of you know this, but I took flight lessons before I could drive. And so I learned to fly a plane before I could drive a car. And there are lots of rules when it comes to flying, like height requirements, there's reckless flying, there's willful and wanton conduct while flying. And we have, Gideon doing an airstrike at low altitude. There are all, that's willful and wanton conduct. There's no way that's okay for him to be doing. Yeah, it's attempted murder and all kinds of other bad things. But yeah, there's lots of bad there. And Gabby, did you bring up the issue of unauthorized flying?
Yeah, because when you put this in the notes, I completely forgot about Moff Gideon flying a TIE fighter at low altitude. My concern was with Mando's jetpack and that he takes off, because presumably, Moff Gideon's TIE fighter is registered somewhere. Somebody has a flight plan for it. I mean, he may be going off the flight plan a little bit, but supposedly it's registered somewhere and he's gotten clearance to land and all of that kind of good stuff. But Mando just straps a jetpack to himself and, takes off. And that's, as we've seen, the notable case of the individual who created his own kind of flying machine from, I believe it was a lawn chair, and some other things, and landed on the White House lawn. You know, you can't necessarily, unauthorized flight, you know, flight mechanisms and now even drones have to be regulated by the Federal Aviation Administration. So, you know, there's, like you said, Josh, there's a lot of codes, a lot of regulations to what goes up in the air, who knows what's up in the air, where you can go, you know, how high you can go depending on what you are, you know, so there's a lot of regulation, and Mando just attaching this newly acquired jetpack to his back and taking off kind of violates, would definitely put him on the FAA's suspicious list, if not get him dragged in, you know, to explain further why he's flying around.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Oh, go ahead,
I don't
Josh.
Yeah, I don't remember if the FAR has jetpacks in there, but I'm sure it does. So that's we can do a blog post. Well, stay tuned. That's a great topic for Mandalorian jetpacks, the Rising Phoenix.
The Rising Phoenix, exactly. And especially one that's uncontrolled, because the armorer tells him that it won't respond to his commands until he knows it and it knows him, and all this kind of, like, you know, mumbo jumbo. And then he clearly can control it to some degree because he turned it on, but he seems to be able to turn it on, you know, and then turn it back off again, which is when he lands. So he doesn't even have any sort of training or control with it. So that's another issue with him kind of, you know, flying around, wreaking havoc without being trained in how to use it, and not having proper communication with his jetpack device.
Well, he did have lessons as a child, so
Yeah.
he's rusty, and
He's
there's
not
a good
one with the jetpack though.
yeah, it has to learn how they have to learn to work together, and like that's cool. And you know, it does harken back to some Rebels episodes with Mandalorians fighting TIE fighters, so it was fun seeing that with live action.
I wanted him to come off of that TIE fighter and say, like, I haven't done my drills yet, as he falls to the ground.
He lands very Superman-esque when he falls for not having very, you know, well coordinated, or however in tune he is with this machine, that he does seem to land very, you know, heroically.
Yeah, it also raises. I don't know if I'd want to wear a cape with a jetpack. That's just a fire hazard waiting to happen. But
isn't that an episode of I can't remember if it's in The Incredibles or Sky High, where they go on and on about why you shouldn't have a cape when you're flying, and there's specifically a moment that traumatized me as a kid, that the superhero with the cape gets yanked into one of the engines of an airplane trying to save it. So
that's definitely in The Incredibles, and that's a really good reference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, it was new, and he took out the TIE fighter, so that's a good thing. Well, let's, you know, I want to focus on. I mean, there are two things to focus on. Let's talk about IG-11, and then we can talk about the crashed TIE fighter. I posted a public poll on our Patreon for like, who's your favorite droid, because somebody put out on Twitter is IG-11 the best droid now? And it's like, oh God, he might be. This episode rocked with him, with taking out the biker scouts with brute force, and then hopping on the speeder bike, which raises the issue of just how many toys did Jon Favreau have, because again, I think that this was his toy box coming out, and he and Filoni got together and they were playing with what can we put in, and bless them both. But you know, he says I'm not a living thing, and you know, his decision to, like, you know, do the self-destruct, knowing that they were in a no-win scenario. So it's very Spock-esque in Wrath of Khan, with, well, either way I'm going to die, but this way everyone else can live, is very noble. It's, somebody, did one of those memes of when girls cried, when boys cried, and then when men cried, and when men cried is IG-11 and lava. And it's like, you know what? Well done. I'm like, it gets an emotional response because people feel connected to this droid that's, kicking ass, and a good first aid medic and a nurse, and like, I can tell you're sad. It's like, damn, this is good. Not exactly legal analysis because I do see him alive, but like, either of you have reactions to IG-11.
I don't know. To me, that was like the perfect, like as soon as they saw the stormtroopers, I was like, they're going to call back the self-destruct function. Because to me, it was just such a bookend kind of storytelling mechanism. That Mando had started very distrustworthy of droids, specifically IG-11. And the whole thing that he kept telling him not to self-destruct and you kind of think, well, if he had self-destructed there, he wouldn't have been he wouldn't have been in the proper condition for Quill to find him, to rebuild him, for him to protect Baby Yoda. And so, for them to kind of call that back and him to say, no, don't self-destruct, but he's saying it not because it wasn't strategically advantageous to them. He was saying it because he cared for IG-11, and he was sad.
Yeah.
So I just like that kind of encompassing narrative.
Well, that then also makes him a dynamic character because he goes from hating droids and having it out for that droid to not wanting that droid to die. It's like,
When it's an interesting bit, right? Because Quill says to Mando in response to his comment that, hey, this is a droid that is literally programmed to kill. He's a bad thing. And Quill's like, no, droids aren't good or bad. They're neutral reflections of their masters. And that sort of comes to life at the end here. And I love it. I forget who mentioned it, but the bit about sadness. But that was the other moment I love where IG-11 is like, do not be sad. And Mando's like, I'm not sad. And he's like, yes, you are. I've analyzed your voice. But for me, one of my favorite movies of all time is Terminator 2. And it was just a nice parallel as he hopped into the lava of the end of that movie, where Terminator 2 finally sort of proves to Linda Hamilton's character that he's not this murderous robot that she knows him to be from the first Terminator movie, and hops down in the lava to destroy himself and ideally protect the future. I have no doubt that was the exact scene Taika Waititi had in mind as he shot that. But I like the business of programming, right? They have this like discussion of which bit of his core programming is primary. Is it the nurse function, or is it this sort of core function that's built in by his manufacturer to prevent capture?
Yeah. What I think is also interesting, and it has more to do with Mando than IG-11, and it's interesting to note, going back to our conversation about Mando being a foster parent, is before IG-11 hands Baby Yoda over, he says, I need to know he'll be safe in your care so I can override the function and go back to my base protocol. And he asks him to say that, and Mando never explicitly says, yes, he'll be safe in my care. I mean, obviously there's an assumption of it, and Baby Yoda gets handed over, but there's no explicit saying he'll be safe in my care. So I kind of wonder if that'll, that was kind of an open line to come back in the future. And if I was doing the home study for the adoption and I was interviewing his acquaintances, including Cara Dune and Greef Karga, and they told me about that, I would be very questionable about that, because you should have said that he would be safe in your care.
He was sad.
He was overcome with emotion.
It's having the helmet on, no one sees him cry. It's like, again, beautiful scene, well done. I like the fact the lava doesn't melt him immediately.
I know.
He's able to walk out and be red hot and take out a squad of stormtroopers. That worked. It was exceptionally well done. And yeah, it's just like, okay, you went way beyond just having, the IG unit be a killing machine. Yeah, he does that and does it very well. But having him be like, you are protected, it's like, nice. That's a lot of neat things to unpack there, and a lot of nice symbolism, and again, everything good about Star Wars. Which then it's, we see the crashed TIE fighter, and naturally Jawas are there trying to scavenge because
those Jawas work fast because that thing had just crashed.
They do not mess around.
They do not mess around at all.
No,
I still want IHOP to be a sponsor of The Mandalorian so we can get Thomas's image of the Jawas at an IHOP going, Suga, Suga, Suga.
Please.
Please, IHOP. Please sponsor.
Here are
IHOP
prayers.
or Denny's. Like, I don't care.
Well, Denny's did Solo, so that might be a more likely solution. But
that's the only Super Bowl commercial I want. The quality content we deserve.
Yeah. Yes. But we have Moff Gideon cut himself out of the TIE fighter with the Darksaber.
Dun, dun, dun.
First time seeing that live action. We've seen it in Clone Wars. We've seen it in Rebels. We last saw it in the hands of a good guy. So what happened there? And Thomas, why don't you start first with this, because I'm sure your reaction was priceless.
The moment when the tip of the blade came through the hull of the TIE fighter, I about jumped out of my seat, and it was like 5 a.m. at my house. So I would have done what I did in this podcast and wake my daughter up and get into trouble. But there's just no other weapon that looks like that in the Star Wars universe. And so you sort of had this instant moment of recognition, and to have the last shot of the show, of the season, in fact, with Moff Gideon sort of holding it. If you haven't watched the Clone Wars and the Rebels TV shows, I really encourage you to go seek those out. And you can probably pretty quickly find which episodes feature the Darksaber in particular to sort of get caught up to speed on it, via an episode guide. But this is a really significant weapon in Mandalorian culture, and not to do a deep dive on the Darksaber, but basically this weapon was crafted by the first Mandalorian Jedi, and then ultimately taken back from the Jedi Order by the Mandalorians, and it became a symbol to unite the Mandalorian people. And traditionally, the person who held it, sort of all other Mandalorians bowed to that particular Mandalorian. So in the Rebel show, you see the weapon get recovered by Sabine Wren, and then ultimately, as the show ends, it gets passed off to a character that we know from the Clone Wars called Bo-Katan Kryze, who takes over as Lord Regent of Mandalore and uses the sword to sort of piece that society back together. But it's just a really, really nice segue, because it was such a significant piece of both of those shows and of Mandalorian culture. I mean, as if we needed another example that the showrunners are paying attention to the Star Wars universe. Like, this was a really, really big piece of that pie, and I think is going to be an awesome feature in season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it raises questions of, is Bo-Katan alive? Because I don't think she would have given that up without a fight. And I don't know. So, like, what happened on a night of 1,000 tears? So there's...
I will cry 1,000 tears if we don't get to see Katie Sackhoff, who does the voice of Bo-Katan Kryze in both animated series, if she doesn't get a chance to reprise her role live action rather.
And yeah, and seeing her as a redhead with the hair like that would be neat because
Yeah.
that character had a very specific hairstyle. It's like,
Oh yeah.
that would be cool to see that. But I digress. It was wonderful call out. I'm sure he's going to get picked up. I look forward to seeing like how do they operate? Like, do they have a star destroyer? Is there a base on this planet? Like, how are they operational and funded? Do we get to play with that? But until then, the Mandalorian cruising with Baby Yoda, and I hope we actually get a name to actually have. So
apparently anybody, I saw an article the other day that any of the main showrunners and anyone in Star Wars leadership gets really testy if you call him Baby Yoda. They like to call him the child, or I guess now the foundling. But yeah, that's like a point of contention of calling him Baby Yoda. So I want somebody to call him Baby Yoda in the show, just
well, that, and it raises interesting questions. So like the armor knew about the Jedi and those stories. Like, we don't get a deep dive. But they should know about the Darksaber, and like that should have history associated with it. So does the Mandalorian know about that? Like, did they skip that in history, or
Well, I don't know if they saw him with it. So
no, I don't think they did.
It may be that no one knows Gideon has this thing.
Yeah.
Agreed. I mean, like, I don't disagree with that, but he would have known about Bo-Katan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Din may have skipped that lesson in history class.
Yeah, it's like, did they, because he would have been, 20-ish or 25-ish by the time of, Battle of Yavin. So he should have some idea. It's also nice seeing the lead who's like in his 40s. Like, that works for me. Being a guy in my 40s, it's like, cool, good.
He may not. You bring up a point that ticked off a memory from the episode. Gideon says that Din is a decommissioned Mandalorian hunter.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder whether that has some more significance to it. In other words, is he like one of these Mandalorian super commandos that we saw from Rebels? In other words, a Mandalorian that played a specific function for the Empire before he stopped doing his thing.
Or does it refer to him being a bounty hunter, and his decommissioned status would have been because of turning on the client?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very true.
So, I mean, it could cut a couple ways. So we'll find out. So
in fall of 2020.
It's good to have something to look forward to. I grew up in the era of, going 3 years in between, 3 Star Wars movies, and then, 16 before the next one. So this is fine by me. Like, there's time to do it right. There's, I'm sure by time of celebration, we'll find out the timing of when Kenobi comes out, when Cassian Andor comes out, and then the timeline for whatever other movie series starts in 2022. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, we're gonna get Star Wars for the rest of our lives. So I am beyond grateful.
I'm actually more looking forward from Celebration to a trailer for Kenobi than I am for a Mandalorian trailer. I just want to see Ewan McGregor again as our favorite Jedi. And I kind of think they're already filming. That's my suspicion.
I thought they were done with the scripts. I thought filming was in July though, but maybe I'm, or June or July. Maybe I'm wrong with that. I know they had some trouble with Cassian Andor, but like that's now back on track. And I don't know what the shooting schedule for that is, or if they're still writing the scripts. I don't know. But Kenobi is my favorite character, and Andor's up there because I'm really excited for a spy show, and they can go in a completely different direction. I remember people speculating about, like, what worlds they could go to, and it's like, if they're going to do a spy show, it could be like Bond. He could be on Coruscant, clean shaven, trying to blend in and do his thing, or there are lots of planets we haven't seen that he could go to as well. But it doesn't have to be
Star
like
Wars.
dirty.
They can make up a planet.
Yeah, and it could be kind of like a Canto Bite, like where everything's nice. Like it doesn't have to be dirty and dungy, and that's the beauty of doing a series. Like you could play with things. It's like this. We're going to go to a dirty, dingy planet, and now we're going to go to an upscale planet, and everyone has to look nice. Beauty of a spy show.
I just need the Cassian Andor series or the Mandalorian to have a coming together of Cassian, Poe, Mandalorian, and Bail Organa, young Bail Organa. But that would make me so happy. I just want that culmination on a show, and I'll be happy. Like, that's all I want. Just get them together, put them in one room. That's it.
Sure, we could moderate a panel. So yeah, there's a lot to look forward to, and I know we'll get another animated series. No idea what, but I know we'll get one. So Thomas, you're very tuned in with the Star Wars news. Did we miss anything?
We get Clone Wars in a little over a month. That's going to be exciting. I think Cassian Andor starts shooting over the summer. I think the August celebration date was probably chosen very deliberately with all of those projects in mind, and the idea that they'll have something to show audiences, even if it's just, a little bit of teaser or a sizzle reel from behind the scenes or something like that. But yeah, it's Josh, to your point, we're now living in an era where we bemoan having to wait 6 or 8 months for new, not even new Star Wars content, because you're getting books, and you can go to the comic book shop every week if you want a new Star Wars story of some type, if you can't wait that long. But 6 or 8 months for new Star Wars TV content, and that's just phenomenal. Even Celebration, I mean, that's a convention that would happen, at least in the 2000s, every 3 years maybe. And then even in the last decade, every 2 at best. So, we're really living in a unique time here. I love it.
Yeah, I'm beyond grateful, and I don't mind waiting. I am fine with it. So there's plenty of content to enjoy, and there's plenty of other content. I mean, we're talking Mandalorian. Picard starts next month as well. So this is, for a Gen X geek, I am beyond ecstatic for all the movies, TV shows, comics, streaming shows that we get. So, this is an absolutely glorious age to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to talk about IG units that have been reprogrammed to be nurse droids. I mean, like, who knew? I have a Cassian Andor jacket. So again, we're living,
I mean, the fact that we're living, for me, the fact that we're living in an era where we have 2 major, I mean, one's already out, one's coming up, of Latino leads in Star Wars is just, it's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Like, the representation that we're getting is just so cool, and it's like, makes you want to cry. But yeah, it's awesome. I need more.
So, like, 3 TV shows, and 2 of them have Latino leads.
Yes,
like, that's
yes. And one is being led by the first female director in Star Wars history. So, who's an Asian American woman. So we are like, this is a brave new world, and I'm excited for it. So
yeah, it's tough to say who was your favorite director, because this has been such a wonderful proving ground for folks that all of them are
hands down.
Her visual storytelling is pretty damn awesome, but Watiki I really like as well. But here's the thing, they all felt like the same universe. Like it wasn't like there wasn't anything disjointed. I mean, they were all competent directors, but Chow was something special with the point of view, camera angles, her visual storytelling is powerful, and I think she'll be exceptional on Kenobi. But I digress. So, anywho, appreciate everyone tuning in. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Legal Geeks. We have a Patreon page at The Legal Geeks as well, so check us out there and contribute if you want to support the show. And everyone, stay geeky, America.